Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
There's an awful lot of corruption in Brazil, but only some of it is punished, and punished by those who are themselves spectacularly corrupt.
First, the president, Dilma Rousseff, was ousted on corruption allegations, and now her predecessor, and very likely her successor, Lula, has been jailed for almost 10 years on separate corruption charges.
And the current president, Temer, who was instrumental in setting both of them up, is now himself embroiled in corruption allegations, though his parliamentary colleagues have exculpated him from those, predictably. It would be difficult to make any or all of that up. So joining us to make some sense of it is Orlando da Rocha Hill, who's a specialist in Brazilian affairs. Orlando, welcome to the Sputnik. Just set it in context for the viewers, would you? What, in general, has Lula been accused, indeed now convicted, of?
He's been accused of so-called passive corruption. No evidence has been presented, but he's been passively in allowing some with a triplex apartment, but it's not even in his name. There's no documents. There's no evidence, and even the Sérgio Moro, the judge, said he has conviction that he's guilty, but there's no proof.
It's for most people a spectacularly politically motivated prosecution, because Lula remains the most popular single politician in the country. It's quite likely, not certain, but quite likely, that had he been able to run for president, he would have won. And moreover, that he's the only person in his party, the Workers' Party, that could win. So it's at the very least an extremely convenient set of allegations, isn't it?
He's got a 30% lead on the most recent poll. But he can still run for president. That's the weird thing about this sentence. He hasn't been jailed. He's been sentenced, and he can legally can still run for president. I think when you look at what's happening in Brazil, there are two different manners of looking at this. One is that this is just a blip, an interval in Brazilian democratic process, and that you can wait to the second instance, and because the judge, Sérgio Moro, hasn't presented any evidence, Lula will come out free from this. I don't agree with that. I think that's the more correct way of looking at it is that this is a very serious crisis in Brazil, and Brazil is going through very exceptional times where the Constitution has been violated. Dilma, as you pointed out, was impeached for silly little fiscal peddling, which any politician, here in Britain, any country do it. It's just fiddling with the budget to make it look like you've
without
got
any
surplus.
personal gain. There's no suggestion of personal gain.
Therefore, she can even run for senator in the next elections. She hasn't been imprisoned or anything. So the problem is really much more serious. So I think if anyone's just looking at this as a minor legal situation that Lula will go out free, what will happen in the second instance will depend a lot more on what happens in the streets, of how the social movements, the trade unions, and the left can organize themselves well, first of all, to make sure that Lula's freed, and also that there are elections. Because whether there are elections in 2018 is not a guaranteed thing, because I think what is happening in Brazil is a realignment of the ruling class in Brazil. There was a crisis in 2011. That's when, I mean, when the 2007, 2008 financial crisis hits Brazil in 2011. And the process that Lula tried implementing, which is reforms without really confronting neoliberalism, allowing like the finance minister is still the same.
Yeah.
He's the same one that was in Lula was in with Dilma and is now with Temer. He's still there implementing neoliberal policies, except the only problem now is that this is neoliberal policies without any social gain. I mean, forget any sort of legal
Social
rights,
contract
social
type thing.
contracts.
Yeah.
That's gone. That's out of the window
Is that
now.
the pink tide movement then? You're referring? Is that the pink tide phenomenon?
The so-called pink tide, which was how do you get social reforms without confronting neoliberalism, and that's
Well, that
gone.
pink tide has gone out now.
It's gone out. It's gone out.
I could have told them before they tried it.
Yes,
but,
yes.
I'd have been King Canute on the beach. This wave won't come in, you know.
No.
Now, all of these sectors that you described are all very badly divided. The left is often divided in many parts of the world, of course. But in Brazil, it seems to me that the left is divided, the social movement's divided, and the trade unions divided, to the detriment of all three. Am I right?
You are right. And I think that is a consequence of the option of not confronting, not directly confronting neoliberalism. You in some ways left the social movement. You disoccupied the streets. And as you know, politics does not like vacuum, and that was occupied by the right wing and even fascist groups in Brazil. I mean, what's happening now? It is a crisis. I mean, of a more tolerant society, a democratic society. That process is finished, and what I think is trying was, first of all, get rid of Dilma and now make sure that Lula can't run for president, is the closing of this coup and the realignment of the ruling class in Brazil. That is the project. And I think the elite in Brazil are united in this project, although they might not know who will be leading it. Will it be Temer? Will it be Maya? That's not clear who's going to be the person there. But they are united on not allowing Lula, because as you said, he is the main candidate in the Workers' Party. The Workers' Party is still the only political party that has a national branches everywhere. I mean, it is a national party. There is no other party on the left that can occupy that space.
Did he really transform, the country? Did he elevate the poor with his Bolsa Familia?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, the Bolsa Familia, the quota system in which allowed people of African descent or indigenous, or who went to state schools. We allowed places in federal universities, projects that let students study abroad. There were loads of things that did improve. What's important about this, it did improve, but it wasn't anything revolutionary. No. It's very social democrat in the sense, and it was a tiny percentage of the GDP. I think 3% of GDP went to these spending, but that was enough to bring up to finish poverty. But Brazil was taken out of the map of poverty.
Well, Saint-Just, the French revolutionary, did, of course, opine that those who half make a revolution are digging their own graves. And in a sense, that's what you're describing here now, isn't it? Because Lula and the Workers' Party half made a revolution. They frightened the horses and the ruling class. And now it may be that they are headed for the political grave, unless you think the street can move sufficiently to frighten the ruling class back, to make them back off, allow Lula to run, be elected as president, and be just as social democratic as he was last time.
Yes, yes, but not to the social democratic. I think that his project is that what they call Lulismo. That's finished because of, you have to look at this in an international context. Neoliberalism has run its course all over the world. I went to a debate lecture with Lord Turner, and he pointed out that in the last 10 years, United States only now is 4%, its GDP is 4% greater than 2007. Britain is only 1%. In the history of capitalism, this has never happened. You've never had a decade of very, very slow growth. And talk about the European Union. It's stagnant. So this neoliberalism is the project is finished. It does what you call the social contract between, capitalism. We've always known that capitalism creates disequality, but the poor have managed to improve themselves. And in Brazil, the same. I mean, the rich did get richer, but the poor got less poor. But that's over. That's finished. I mean, and I think the way it translates into Brazil and Latin America is the end of the pink tide project. So what you said is correct. I think we have to make sure that Lula, and I think the left in Brazil have to do that, is make sure that Lula is the next president. He is candidate because that is the ticket that you can win. But it has to come from below. It has to come from movement in the streets and a very strong anti-austerity project that well, maybe they can learn from Britain with their
you've taken the words right out of my mouth. Who'd have thunk it that the British Labour Party leader might be someone worth studying for revolutionary movements in Latin America. So, in a word, are you confident or are you pessimistic?
I'm confident because it's in my nature, and I think there has been demonstrations that this happens, like the occupation of schools by very young kids. I mean, these kids as young as 14 occupying schools to prevent the cuts in education. And so there is potential for this. But these movements, so on, because the left, as you said, are all splintered up, trade union movement is splintered up, if they can get there together, there is a lot of potential. And Brazil's had their second general strike, and the general strike were very successful general strikes. I mean, you're talking about general strike in a country the size of Europe. So it's like having a general strike in London, Paris, and so on.
If only Europe was a country. Thank you very much indeed, Orlando, for coming on the Sputnik.
Coming up, a veritable giant of stage and screen. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Sputnik. He has a list of film credits as long as your arm, from Indiana Jones to Midnight Express, although he'll always be the wily ambassador of Qumranistan in Yes, Prime Minister for me. He's now appearing in The Great Outdoors, in Regent's Park Open Air Theatre, in Charles Dickens' epic Tale of Two Cities. He's the world's most famous Armenian. He's a political rebel and fighter of the best causes. So why wouldn't we welcome him on board the Sputnik? The great, the truly one and only Kevork Malikyan. Kevork, it's an honour to have you here. Let's start, if we may, with the open-air performance, which we've seen and which is truly magnificent. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It's a far, far greater thing I do than I have ever done before. These words ring out across the ages. How does it feel to be on stage amongst all these giant containers in the Regent's Park Open Air Theatre?
Extremely trying, because it is not an easy set at all, and I think I can easily say it's probably the hardest production I've worked on, but it is also possibly the best and the nicest production I've worked on. Because of the storyline, of course, it's 200 years since Charles Dickens wrote A Tale of Two Cities, but the adaptation by Matthew Dunster, I think is wonderful. The fact that it applies, he's brought the story back to the world today.
Exactly,
the way
yes.
the world is today.
That's not easy to
and
do.
we share, absolutely, and we share the world today, and we go back to the 18th century as the world was. And the sad thing is that nothing has changed.
Yeah. Yeah, between the refugees and Marie Antoinette.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. These containers obviously represent Calais, or the Palestinian refugees and the Syrian in Jordan, or the Syrian refugees in Turkey. So yes, it is absolute sheer pleasure. I think it's a wonderful production, a great cast, and beautifully directed, I think. Painful in many ways.
Very painful, yes.
Yes, to have to
I sat
listen
listening
to
to my
these
seat
words
at the end of it. It was so powerful. And it's there till 5th of August, so people have still got a chance to see it. But as you alluded to there, not that much has changed, really. There's still 2 cities in every 2 cities. Yeah. There's still 2 countries in every country. Yeah. And the world is still ill-divided. Yeah. It is remarkable. I was thinking of it after I saw your production. After all that upheaval and revolution and political change, and we're now in the centenary of the Russian Revolution, the Great October Revolution, and so on. Actually, we're now back in a world that's not that much different from the one that existed at the time that Dickens was writing about.
Yes, absolutely, sir. We keep hearing, and we have over many, many years since I was born, and we keep yearning for a better world, that one day, governments will learn, politicians will learn, money men will learn, etc. But it seems as if the world doesn't learn, unfortunately.
And the people will learn, to be fair.
Yes.
You know,
one day we
Turkeys
hope.
do vote for Christmas, and voters vote for people who are actually against their own interests. But that's another matter. As I said, you're the world's most famous Armenian, but you were actually born...
Very, very nice of you. I mean, there are a lot more famous Armenians than me.
Well,
but it is lovely of you. Coming from you, it has to be true.
As I say, you were never more dangerous than when you were being perfectly charming. That's what the independent theatre review of your Yes Prime Minister actually said, the wily Komranistan ambassador. Yes. The situation that we're in Turkey is fraught. Let's put it no higher than that. You still come and go there. You've got an important film festival with all your films coming out. Soon you've got a book coming out. But there's no point in denying, is there, that for intellectuals, for the cultural milieu in Turkey, for the political class, and for the mass of the people, they are beset by many, many problems in contemporary Turkey.
Yeah. Of course, it's the Middle East is in a huge, sadly, mess.
Yes.
Absolutely, and it has been for. I think the trouble is, and of course there are 2 sides to the coins. Obviously, if you live in the land, if we, in our sort of belief and Western sort of understanding of democracy, by getting rid of people like Saddam Hussein and the Libyan leader, Colonel Gaddafi, etc., and now the Syrian leader, and we have actually disturbed the whole area, and how are we going to deal with it? We've really gone back. At least these people, to some extent, ruled the country. There was a sort of unity. They coexisted in many ways, Christian or Muslim, etc. Now, I just don't know. I mean, as a humble little actor, I have absolutely no idea how it's going to be solved. I think we've ruined the place for years to come. And Erdogan, I have to be, I've lived in London since 1963, but when I went back in 2011 and 2012, I have to say this, it's obviously, these are extremely difficult times in Turkey for everybody, but particularly for journalists, writers, a certain section of the politicians who, like you, dares to speak the truth and paint the picture as it is. But during Erdogan's reign, which has never happened before, Erdogan has allowed the publication of several books on the Armenian genocide. He has allowed discussions on television programs. He has allowed conferences on lost Armenians, etc. But also, so this is to be appreciated to a certain extent. He's given some land back, back to the Armenians, whether they are churches or big halls, etc. But nevertheless, Hrant Dink was killed, assassinated during his reign. So there are questions to be asked, and there are questions to be asked of all politicians, leaders, all over the world, I suppose.
For sure.
Yeah.
In any case, you stood up for Turkish honour. I well recall in your role in that amazing film, Midnight Express, you were the Turkish prosecutor standing up for Turkish dignity.
Absolutely.
That must stand you in some good stead.
Yes. I was totally, although the belief was at the time that this was Armenian propaganda money and Greek propaganda money to paint Turkey as a horrible place, you know. But my answer to them was that prisons are prisons world over. And the people who look after the prisons will do what they do in order to keep the the system going. But they loved me because I stood up for principles
for Turkish, Turkish
no drugs
honor.
in Turkey, no drugs trafficking in Turkey, and our prisons are absolutely wonderful. They're like gardens of.
But you played in The Promise as well.
Yes, I did, and I'm so glad you mentioned it. Thank you very much, and I'm sure George would have mentioned it. And I really had the pleasure and the privilege to be in The Promise, and I'm very grateful to Terry George for choosing me for the part of Oscar Isaac's father. It is a film which I believe is 100 years too late to be made, but it was never allowed to be made. The MGM had it on their books for years to be filmed. It was never allowed because of pressure from Turkey, being a NATO member, etc. But somehow, you see again, this time for The Promise there was no pressure there was on anybody, so the film was made, and as I said, 102 years too late. But it was I think it was a great film. It was a wonderful film, terrific cast, terrifically directed, and for the first time, millions all over the world learned the true story of 1915. So yes,
it's epic and enormous importance. From the sublime to Indiana Jones. Yeah. How much fun was that to make?
I would think probably the greatest fun I've had, and Harrison Ford is such a magical heart and wonderful, generous actor, and all my scenes, fortunately, were with him. And also to work with Steven Spielberg and George Lucas was just what I didn't know, and it was a wonderful, wonderful surprise, is when an actor does his first scene on the film, he shoots his first scene, both of them walk over to you and they say, "Welcome to the family," which is why it was a great experience, and an experience that I will cherish. And I was kindly, very generously invited to the royal premiere with Prince Charles and Princess Noor in the West End.
Now you in the play Tale of Two Cities, you play a 78-year-old man. You're in fact a mere stripling of 74, which is astounding to me because you look at least 20 years younger than that. If I look like you at 4:30, I'll be happy.
I wish I had your look, sir.
Well, yes. Are you going to work until the end? Is there any prospect of you retiring?
Yes,
you may say why.
I think I could probably exist on olives and cheese and cucumber and tomatoes, which is what we grew up with in eastern Turkey, where I was born in Diyarbakir. But my belief is I love my profession, and particularly the theatre, but in general I love my profession. And for as long as God enables me to keep the alertness of my brain and the goodness, health of my body, I will go on.
Fantastic.
But I think I will know the day when I'm sure somehow that
I hope
enough is
comes.
enough, yes.
It's been an honour to have you on the Sputnik.
Thank you, sir.
Malikyan.
Thank you very, very much. The privilege is mine. Many thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
And now it's your turn to tell us what you think through the portals of social media. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, on the Brazil case, Dan Dare says there's no real hope left for the left anywhere. Wherever it gets a foothold, the wealthy and the market make sure of its demise. And The Tales of Two Cities, did you know it was the second best-selling book ever? Kontiki says, seems like there are the same unjust oppressors, noble heroes, and disinterested fence-sitters as always. Only now there's computers and iPhones.
I've never been in the presence of anyone with the grace and the class of Kevork, I must say. And he's optimistic about the future, as was Orlando.
Yeah.
And I happen to think both of them are correct.
Well, that's all the time we've got for the tweets.
Which, alas, means that's the end of the show.
But you can stay in touch with us on Facebook, Sputnik on Russia Today, or Twitter and Instagram, RT_Sputnik. It's goodbye from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. It's been marvellous.